Welcome everyone. We're very excited to have this as actually our second session with reclaiming intimacy for couples. And we are going to focus on maintaining intimacy and sexual well-being during and after cancer today. So we're definitely going to explore more of those common concerns couples navigate and offer practical, compassionate guidance. Our goal is to normalize these challenges and give you the tools that you can use right away. So to begin, I'm actually going to have you feel your feet flat on the ground. Really situate yourself in the chair where you feel supported. And I'm going to have you put one hand on your heart, another one on your abdomen, and start breathing into your hands. Really feeling, how your breath is moving throughout your body. Does it feel like it's stuck? Do you feel some tension in those muscles? And feel free to shift and adjust however you need to get yourself a little bit more settled and connected to your body. Take a few breaths on your own, really feeling your breath moving through your abdomen, filling your hands. You can play with the pressure on your chest and your abdomen, almost feeling as if you're giving yourself a great big hug. And take this moment, you can close your eyes, put them on a soft gaze to connect to yourself. And with your next inhale, really think about filling the top of your head all the way down to your toes. Make it the deepest breath that you've taken all day. And with that exhale, release anything that no longer benefits you. The weight of the day, any stress, tension, things that you just don't want to carry anymore. Take one more breath in, and as you exhale, I'm going to invite you to let it out with a sigh or noise, something that just allows your body to fully release. When you're ready, you can start to gently flutter your eyes open again, wiggle your fingers and toes, bring your awareness back into the room. Hopefully, you feel a little bit more connected to yourself, and a little bit more present as we dive into this very exciting topic. So, certainly, before we begin our structured discussion, I'm going to introduce myself and then have my colleague Tracy introduce herself. So I am Alexandria Callahan. I'm a clinical sexologist and work at the Chicago location. I've been with the company for 17 years. I've really been diving into the world of sexual health for the last probably at least 6, 7 years. So I feel like I'm new in it, but at the same time, I feel like this has been part of my journey this whole time. So it's very exciting to be part of it and sharing this information with all of you. And certainly, too, something I wish that, couples knew about intimacy after cancer is that it's different for everybody. And it changes naturally anyway. And you throw cancer in there, and it can be really exciting. It can be scary too, but definitely really exciting to be able to explore different ways to connect with your partner, getting to know each other after you've gone through something so life-changing and being able to come out on that other side still feeling that relationship and the strength within it. And I will hand the baton over to Tracy.
Well, my goodness, I'm glad that you're here. If you're watching us in a live format, if you're catching us on recording, still glad you're here with us. So this is the Alex and Tracy show as we are creating it to be, which really is just discussion, right? It's bringing in discussion around sexuality and sexual health and all that cancer brings to that. So I'm Tracy Owen. I'm in this space very deliberately. As I tell people, I I have all the little pieces of paper on the wall to say I've spent a lot of time and intentional effort and money to help people in this very unique part of life. So I'm an oncology sexual health nurse. I'm going to help with body stuff impacted by cancer, emotional stuff related, impacted by cancer. Really, any of those things are fair game in our space. The thing I wish people knew about intimacy, both during, after, and through that whole experience is um, tether loosely and keep looking for opportunities. And you don't have to do that alone. You have people who are here to help you out.
Beautiful. So we are actually going to start by diving into body image and self-esteem. So these are, I think this is one of the most universal challenges, adjusting to the changing body. So I'm going to open up our discussion today with what body image concerns do you see most often among survivors and how do these affect intimacy?
I think there's a lot of common place where we see it. And then I think each person kind of brings with that their own story because, man, in our society, we say a lot to people about their sexuality, their body, their desirability, their worthiness, right? A whole lot is said in our body image and the body that we carry into an intimate experience with us. So I think the very first thing is trying to find my own place inside my body and try to figure out ways to shut out the chatter. And then again, that flexibility of change. I mean, I think about my hair. I'm a redhead girl, calling card, warning flag, whatever whatever you label. That's what my red hair is for me. And I often have thought about this. If I look in the mirror and I don't see a redhead looking back at me, what will I see? Right. So I think the body image is the obvious ways, and I think it's a lot of not so obvious or expected ways. I mean, we would expect if you've had surgery and a part of you is changed from that. I think we kind of expect some of those things to happen, but I think we carry a lot into the story already. What about you? What do you think about body image?
I think that's a huge piece because really all the treatment our patients go through impacts their body. It's
Everything.
traumatic,
Yeah.
systemically, head to toe, inside
Yeah.
out. Your body is being beat up and changing. And I've had so many patients that, I talk with them about, looking in that mirror, like as you said, and, who's looking back at you? Do you recognize
Hmm.
that face in the mirror? Especially with, the more tangible things, like our hair loss. Certainly, if we have surgeries that alter the way our body is. And it's like, had so many people say, well, I had this body for 60 years and now I had surgery
Hmm.
and it's different. Or, especially
Hmm.
for a lot of my breast cancer patients, they're toying with this idea of do I do reconstruction or not? Do I stay flat? I had one, she's like, I don't want to be 80 in the nursing home with the perky breasts of a 20-year-old. She's like, I want to be sagging with everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's
I don't want to stand out at, where maybe that kind of standing out is better at one age for her, in her opinion, at
Mhm.
an older age. It didn't feel as good to her when she looked at
Right.
it.
Yeah. So
Um,
it's definitely that huge piece that I think all of our patients, male and female, are
Male
struggling
and
with.
female. Yeah. I think about just really the many roles that breasts serve in society, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's very, very few conversations about breasts go back to the fact of their body design, which was to create milk to feed a baby, right? Like that's the purpose of these breasts. And I think we apply a whole lot beyond that kind of what is the function of this body part. And society tells us a lot about breasts. So I think yes, it's there, but I think part of the other piece of that is how couples navigate that conversation as things are changing.
Yeah. I think that's a huge piece and might be gearing off a little bit, but I've had quite a few patients too that are single and they said, how do I have this conversation
Hmm.
when I'm trying to go in the dating world again?
Hmm.
And even just to have a conversation with your spouse that you've had for however many years, can be really challenging to navigate
Right,
saying, okay, well, I'm not the same person that I was when we got married. But I think it's important too for the couples to recognize that neither of them are really the same person because they've grown together, they've experienced
right,
things, and it's embracing those changes.
right. I also think about ostomies. When I think about the heavy burden of cancer changes that can happen, folks that end up with either, a created surgical hole for urination or a created surgical hole for stool, I think suddenly what is usually a very private, behind the door experience suddenly has a much more public presence. And, I think that I haven't met anybody, and I can't imagine in myself, I wouldn't have some work to do to try to embrace and find my sense of comfort, both for me as the person and me as the caregiver. So I think body image change goes both ways, and I think that is probably one of the top things that you and Cindy and I help people and couples navigate through is this changing body, whether that's from cancer, whether that's from other disease process or natural aging, right? That can come in so many different ways through a lifetime of body changing. I mean, we're changing from the moment, from literal insemination until absolute death. We are in a metamorphosis. Our
Absolutely.
body is constantly changing. And so I don't think we give ourselves credit for all that our bodies are navigating and changing through. And I think that's a great place that we can help people and couples really come back home to themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And great bringing up the ostomy. I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and it's right there. It's in the room. I mean, it makes noises when it wants to, and it's very vocal at times. And I've had some patients where they just make a joke about it, and others where you can tell like they're just mortified by it,
Yes.
and it's just trying to figure out, okay, how do I adjust to this? If it's
Mhm.
permanent, is it temporary? And how can I relate to my loved ones? Make you still feel loved and appreciated even when you have this major change going on.
And
Um,
the truth is, we're walking past people with ostomies all day long.
yeah,
We're not going to know that when we're walking past that person. Uh, so I think there's also a level of social awareness and social grace to understand that that's a real thing and to kind of help create a bubble for that person to feel safe out in the world,
yeah, and I
in
think it's
their new
important
body.
for our patients to remember, even our caregivers too, that we tend to see those like imperfections and then we think everyone can see them. So, with the ostomy, it's like, oh, everyone knows I have an ostomy. Or, even though like you might have a wig on, it's like everyone knows this isn't my real hair because it's, the things that we're a little bit more uncertain of or self-conscious of. And it's figuring out what you need to help build that confidence so that you're embracing it. Because then I feel like you're not going to have as much of that perceived judgment as you might otherwise.
Absolutely. Man, that's a deep conversation that goes on and on, doesn't it? It's deep and
Absolutely.
wide. it's such a rich conversation to share with people. So, I hope out there there's somebody saying, man, I could probably use a little support around that myself.
Yeah,
All right, man, body image. I've struggled with my own, I think.
I think everyone has.
I haven't met them yet, right? I keep waiting to meet the perfect. I mean, I can remember through a career in nursing, 40 plus years of caring for bodies. And even the most perfect of all the bodies that I have ever seen could still point out like their top five flaws in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
And so I guess there's hope for all of us, right?
Yeah. All right. Shall we go to our next topic?
Sure. What
Uh,
is it?
Sexual function changes. So this
Ooh.
is definitely another area where couples struggle with as the physical side effects of sexual intimacy. So to start us off, we'll look at which sexual function changes like pain, arousal shifts, or desire changes tend to catch couples off guard.
Oh man, this is okay. Here's my answer to this. I'll be curious about yours. I think what catches people off guard is this. And I say this both as a professional and I also say this as a couple who navigated a cancer diagnosis as the caregiver, right? So I see all these problems in that twofold of the three dimensions. Um, I think the absolute disruption of life, the bomb that goes off, and the hard renegotiation puts us in a tension. And that tension holds on for a long time. We're hearing these really hard things where the bodies are going through likely some things that don't feel very good to it, right? We're certainly not a spa treatment by any chance. So things we're doing are causing people both emotional and physical pain, and we're carrying that in our body. And then we're having these hormone shifts that are happening through all bodies. And so that's further causing some change within the body. So these little bodies, these little whole beings are going through so much, and none of it is really great, awesome stuff, right? So it leaves us tense, cut off from us in the physicality part. And I think that leads to a lot of pain. And I think that shows up sexually. I think that shows up in the day-to-day pain of the body and the joints. I think that shows up and plays a role in the fatigue that we feel. Um, so I think we have these really huge things happening, and they're happening at the same time for both people, but in very different ways. And I think all of those shifts play out to some physical things that we have to deal with, whether it be obvious shifts in desire. If I'm really stressed and anxious, it's going to be hard to also feel arousal and orgasm and pleasure, right? The muscles are going to hold tension, and that can show up causing pain with sex for women. It can show up as causing pain for sex for men too, right? So I just think that pain shows up for 1,000 different reasons. And I think that's really, by the time that shows up, people are surprised because we're not thinking about sex when we first get that diagnosis, right? It goes to the very back burner. And I'm thinking that when you come back to it, I think sometimes our people are surprised that all of these shifts have changed that experience for them, and that catches them off guard.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny too that you said that they're not thinking about sex. I had a lot of our patients. We have them fill out a survey, and with part of that are sexual health questions. And I had one patient say, "I'm dealing with cervical cancer right now. I'm not thinking about sex. Like, I don't even need to answer this question." However, I mean, like, educating them too more on that sexual wellness piece, which I hope that we're doing here too, um, is an important aspect, and it is part
Yeah.
of the survival and the quality of life. And I think for my patients, just from that counseling perspective, I talk to them a lot about the trauma of this. And when you get a cancer diagnosis, it puts you into that survivor mode. And I always give
Oh,
the
yeah.
example that, if you're hiking through the woods with your loved one, you're on this romantic stroll or whatever, and, you might be starting to feel, all the hormones rushing and
Might
all
be
those feel
making
good
out underneath
feelings
the
and
tree.
emotions. Yeah. You're just grabbing each other, you're looking for that perfect spot to lay like a blanket out or just to like grab each other. And a bear comes up. And that bear for you now is the cancer. And you're staring at this bear. The last thing you're thinking about is, well, I really wanted to, get down and dirty with my honey. You're thinking, oh my gosh, we need to do something to survive. We're
Right.
going to
We're in
run, we're going to scream, we're
survival.
going to fight, we're going to do everything we possibly can.
We're gonna play dead.
And that urge, yeah, yeah, that surge throughout your body, it increases the cortisol, the stress, all of that. That can increase pain if you're already experiencing that pain, and it keeps you in that hyper aroused state where the last thing you're going to think about is your genitals and the blood flow going there, and finding that intimate connection. And I think that's a huge shift for a lot of people because they don't realize they still want to feel that closeness, and that closeness you see in that those deep, intimate, passionate moments. And they're like, well, how do I get that back when I'm in survival mode now? So, I talk with a lot of, my patients and caregivers about how else you can find that intimate connection. What are you doing to communicate? How are you, are you still holding hands? Are you snuggling? Are you, finding those
Hmm.
moments where you can
Are you
breathe
redefining
together?
them?
Yes.
Like, I know we can't do this, but what about can we do that?
Yeah. Redefine all
What
of
about?
that. And that
And,
goes to,
depending
when I,
upon what that cancer journey looks like, for some people, that's a shorter run. And for other people, for other couples, that is a long, that's a marathon of long term. And what I can do in the short term versus what I can do in the long term are probably two different things. And so really
Mhm.
being, but I think the question, was on this physical side was, man, those physical symptoms start showing up in the Tulsa facility, which is where I started uh, in oncology sexual health. We were surveying our breast cancer population, and we were finding that about 42% of those women already had some physical side effects of menopause or other issue like PCOS or endometriosis or many of those other gynecological things that can happen. And this physical connection, right? If sex doesn't feel good to my body, there's no way for my brain to want to do it. And so I think that, when you start talking about, obviously, we're going to shift the physical body because we're doing treatment that's going to impact that whole body. Um, and so I think that's something else we help folks do is understand what's happening with the body, right? Because that takes away a little bit of the personal, you don't want me or you don't want to be with me, or can you understand that I'm having pain, right? If we can have those conversations and say, we have a place to go to get help for that. Right. Well known. We know this. I say to people, of course, this is a problem. How could it not be just from the physical changes that the chemicals and the surgeries and the radiation that we do to treat cancer does to the body? So I think obviously we're going to be causing some physical changes. And that's what we want to help folks do is find the yes in their story, even if the yes has to be different.
Yeah, well said.
Sweet.
All right.
We're going
So
to let
communicating
anybody on here can
challenges.
like ask questions later, but we're going to get through this just so you know while we're not asking anybody their thoughts. We're doing this with some method. We're doing recording of the conversation. When we're through with the recording piece, we'll turn recording off and then we can have open discussion so that whomever wants to ask a question doesn't feel vulnerable to a bunch of people on a recording. Sorry for that diversion, Alex.
Oh no, that's good. And actually, too, if you have a piece of paper and a pen and want to write down your questions as you're coming, we're discussing, please feel free to do that too, so that you don't forget, because we're covering a lot of ground. Uh, So with that too, looking at communication challenges, even when couples love each other deeply, talking about intimacy can be incredibly difficult after cancer. Actually, during cancer too, as you're going through all of these changes. So what communication barriers, Tracy, do couples commonly face, and how can they begin to move through them?
Well, I think there's a lot of our history that comes with this. How have we solved problems up till now? Is
Yeah.
this the only thing that we've really had to try to navigate to solve problems through? So we're just trying to figure it out. Um, I think specific to intimacy and sexuality, I think a lot of those barriers began before the cancer diagnosis because I think they came with the societal messages around sexuality and talking about sex. And, when sex just kind of finds its way and works okay in a relationship, most couples don't develop any language around it. So then when things start to have some struggle where we don't have any habit of how to talk about it, right? So it even gets weirder to talk about then. Um, and so I think a lot of the communication barrier around intimacy and sexual health is that we have really not ever had a social language for a lot of those conversations. I mean, you're the therapist, so you tell us there.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, there's so much stigma around sex and sexuality. So it's not a conversation and people just are like, oh, well, this is what we do. And I always praise the couples that are able to voice and say, this is what I like, or, this is what I find pleasurable. Because even, with a lot of my patients, I'll say, well, you need to redefine what feels your body's changed. You've gone through all these things. And I would say, oh, the majority of them, like, well, I didn't even really know what I liked before. We did it. It was enjoyable, but I don't really know what it means to have great sex or that connection. And that it goes back and it kind of sound like a broken record, but I'm like,
Hmm.
that's why this is so fun because you get to explore, you get to
Hmm.
figure out what does feel good for you and doing it on your own and then bringing it to your partner and saying, okay, this is what feels really good for me. And that can open up a whole different realm of conversations. And it's not just about that physical, intimate, the act of having sex, but it's, having those deeper conversations to build that intimacy too. Being able to
Hmm.
say, hey, these are some of my fears, these are my desires, these are some things that are really weighing on me. Have you thought about that too? It's kind of those elephant in the room conversations that we might not want to have, or we don't know how to breach that topic, but it's being able to say, okay, I need to take that leap of faith. I need to jump in with both feet because this is the person that I love and they're my support person. And I need to have this conversation and feel safe within it.
Absolutely. And when we can talk about it, because the brain, I always tell people, listen, brains are so powerful. And if you don't fill in the information, that your partner's brain is going to fill in the information. That's just what brains do. Brains don't like holes in stories, right? So If it starts telling a story and you don't provide your actual thoughts or feelings or whatever to that scenario, then, the odds are I've got a very creative brain and I'm going to fill in those holes. And sadly, I'm not going to fill those holes in oftentimes with great stories for either one of us,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
where we don't want room to exist, we have to make sure to close that gap. And that's uncomfortable, right? That's the roll the shoulders back. I don't know about you, but sometimes I have couples practice this because it's a very physical way of being in it, right? I'm either taking a big breath and leaning in with you, or I'm taking a big breath and holding it and bracing away from you.
Yeah. Well, and it is amazing too, just how like present, even just that physicality that you were showing, like, opening up the chest is a very vulnerable place to be because you're exposing your heart and those emotions. But, I've noticed even when I'm working with couples, one will be retreating, one will be advancing, or they'll both be, enclosed, their arms are crossed, and it's just like, nope, nothing's coming in. So it's even looking at how you're approaching each other in those conversations, or when you do. If you're both
Oh yeah.
exhausted after a long day, that's probably not the time to have a deep conversation. Saying, okay, when do we feel the most energized? When we don't have 1,000 things going on, or we can carve out that time, even if it's 5 minutes, to really sit and be present with each other.
hmm Well, and I always be clear if we're gonna set a time to sit and talk, let's be clear ahead of time on what the one or two things we're gonna talk about is gonna be, so that we don't end up, like kitchen sinking and finger pointing and getting lost in all of that, but let both people be prepared to what we want to talk about. Hey, can we get together on Saturday sometime to talk about these two things? Um, because otherwise, if you've got a long story together, right, you could get into a great snowball fight with that. But I think communication is hard. So what I tell people is, if you're navigating this and you're just having normal couple bumps along the way, but otherwise you're managing it well, great. But if the bumps are coming pretty routinely or they're starting to feel bigger, of course they are. You're in the fight for your life, and that makes every communication more difficult automatically, just the stress of that. So, man, that's something we'd love to help you navigate. And, whether that be that we need a behavioral health team, we got it, right? And the sexual wellness team and the behavioral health team, we're an intertwined little family, and so we share the family, right? We all kind of take care together, and I think those are great tools for people under duress.
Absolutely. And I would say too, for that communication piece, one thing I tell all of my couples is that you communicate and listen to each other to understand, not to respond. So when you're there and you're present and you're waiting to understand, it's like, all right, I'm hearing it. Versus, okay, yeah, you're coming with this, and I'm going to come right back at you with whatever. Like
Right.
it completely changes the dynamic, and it allows a richness to that conversation.
We have created a rule. I think it's for both. It's for the good of all. But when we need to talk about something, we state what our worry is. The other person doesn't get to respond until we come back later, so that we're actually listening to the thing and then reflecting on the thing before we voice something about it. And that's been I we're still in the practice of marriage. We're still trying to figure it all out, right?
Yeah.
But I think those kind of things, if people need help, why get lost in it when there's easy access to that support? And that's the thing I think that's heartbreaking to me is when I see one of our patients and they've been struggling for a long period of time and didn't reach out or didn't know to reach out. So hopefully us showing up in this space, Alex, gives people permission because that's what how we get a conversation is we give a permission to it, right?
Definitely. So looking at fatigue, pain, and treatment side effects, that practical physical limitations also affect intimacy and often require a lot of creativity around them. So how can couples maintain closeness when fatigue, pain, or mobility changes get in the way?
Well, fatigue is there. I mean, that's present, I think. I'm guessing that that's probably one of our top universal side effect complaints of overall incidence cancer would be that sense of fatigue. So there's something there. And what I try to talk to people is trying to figure out there's a physical fatigue, right? Like I've been running a marathon and my body is exhausted, but there's also an emotional fatigue. There's a recreational fatigue, right? I'm not having my whole life, this whole year's been about cancer treatment. And about the time I start to feel good, it's time to go back and get treatment again. So there's been no joy in my life, right? So I think there's fatigue comes in a gazillion ways of our life. And I think there's not ever going to be one fix to fatigue. I think we're going to have to try to figure out for that particular person what are little tiny incremental things that help emotional fatigue, relational fatigue. I mean, there can become relational fatigue from heavy caregiving burden,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that
I
caregiver
mean,
burnout.
yeah,
And
I
then the
mean,
guilt that goes along with it.
and then who am I to be complaining about how tired I feel while I'm watching my partner go through this, right? So I think the fatigue comes on very many levels. I think pain comes on many levels for people. And I think we set folks up to feel less because we only come at that from one aspect, right? If I only ever try to treat your pain by giving you a pill, I'm really never going to do that, right? How do we come at it from the whole person to deal with that pain? How do we have emotional tools, physical tools, treatment tools, social tools, And so I really try to come at fatigue, pain, and treatment side effects in big way. Because I'll tell you what, I've seen people who feel really crappy, but two of their favorite people dropped by and brought them a Brahms shake, and their pain went down, right? And their outlook went up, and their breath slowed, and their heart rate slowed, just because this social interaction came that felt really good to them. On the converse, you can have two people that don't do that, that feed you differently, bring you a Brahms shake, and you're not, you're going to come away with more pain and more stress from it. But I think we can look at all the ways of dealing with it, and that helps us help people better.
Well said. Yeah, so I mean, there's also, that emotional disconnection and changing roles that goes along with all of that too. So,
Oh,
how
yeah.
cancer reshapes our identity, shifts the couples, and that can be huge too. I've had so many of my patients say, okay, well, you know what? I used to be the main person that did all these things in the
Yeah.
house, and now my spouse has to pick it up, and now I feel like a burden, or I'm not carrying my weight, and that's a really hard place to be too. Or,
Yeah.
even just the patient that wants that independence still when their body is physically saying, nope, this is a limitation for you, and
Yeah.
how challenging that can be to say, well, I used to be able to, carry the laundry basket down the stairs and back up, and now someone has to carry it for me. I can load the wash machine and, switch them over to the dryer and I could fold the clothes, but I can't carry it up anymore. Yeah, and
You
that's really
know,
hard.
my husband is a retired paramedic firefighter. He's a hero kind of, right? Big, strong, just, and when he was diagnosed, I'll tell you that one of the hardest parts for me in that was that as he was going through this significant body treatment, and I'm watching him get weaker, and I'm watching him lose weight, and I'm watching him be in pain. I mean, there's nothing more soul crushing than that, and then you have to also allow them to be, right? So this is the caregiver part of it. The other side of that is I have to encourage, empower him to do the things that he can do and not. So I think when you start to think about these side effects and then you think about the emotional toll that it takes and you think about the changing role that it takes on both people, that's huge, right? That's a huge thing for that couple to navigate. And my goodness, we do a really poor job about talking about that,
Yeah.
of all that the couple is trying to navigate financially. If they have kids at home, they're trying to figure out, a restructuring of managing children and homework and activities, and someone's working, I mean, and now maybe home responsibilities are managed differently. I just think that, in my opinion, all couple, this is Tracy's opinion, all couples could use at least a touch base with us, right? Like, just to remind people to breathe, to remind them that here's some tools that have helped other people. Maybe they could help you. Um, because of course they're having some struggle. How could we not? I mean, that's what I told my
Right.
husband as we were going through it ourselves. I'm like, we're coming in better prepared than 99% of people coming into this, just because I've been in oncology for 15 years and you've lived with me for 15 years, right? So you absorb all that from your mate. But even then, we had to navigate these things.
Yeah.
And so that was, yeah, we were really sensitive to that because it does really reshape us.
Well, and it's so hard too to know like when to ask for help or like as a patient or the caregiver. A lot of times I've had caregivers say, well, this is my job. I've got to take care of all of this. And it's like, well, you got to put that oxygen mask on first too. So what
Yeah,
are you doing to take care of yourself? Where are the
right.
rest of your supports around you? And then of course our patients not wanting to have to ask for help because so much is already being done for them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then
Well,
looking
and just
to
the
like,
role of a patient. I mean, let's be
yeah,
real. I don't know about you. I'm a really awesome nurse. I am a really not awesome patient, you
yeah.
know?
Yep.
And so if you, and I know I'm not the only one because I've taken care of a whole bunch of them in my life, right? But you put people that are used to being the caregiver in the role of patient, and obviously that's just a complete mind-blowing thing for that person. So yeah, I think again, I think everybody needs somebody to talk to through this.
I agree. Yeah, and it's just huge role changes. And, it's wondering too, when is it time to seek that professional help or how do you reach out to it? I think with City of Hope, we have it a little bit easier for patients just because we've got eyes in the clinics. They're looking at patients. They'll see that you're having a rough day, or, they'll ask about side effects and say, oh, well, do you know that this team is here? There's people that can talk to you about that. There's
Yeah.
support. However, it's also, finding that courage to say, yeah, I do need that help, or even
Yeah.
just asking for it or seeking it out. We've had some patients that do, and Others that are like, no, I don't want to be a burden to you. So I've actually gotten to the point where I tell people, it's like, well, if you don't come and see me because you don't want to be a burden, and all the rest of the patients decide they don't want to come and see me because they don't want to be a burden, then I don't really need to be here because no one's coming to see me. And my dog's going to be really upset that I can no longer pay for his house and a place to live. So I'm going to need you to come and see me so I can still be here and help
Right.
you make this a little bit easier.
And if this is where we're at, and I think I take this from being an old ER nurse, right? I'm an old trauma nurse. And in a trauma, we cannot do it. We cannot step in as one person and save this person who's been in a multi-system trauma. It takes all of us stepping in and serving our part to get us all down the road, right? Safely and as intact as we can possibly be with the highest quality of life we can possibly have. And that takes more than just me. Tracy, as a clinician, I mean, I can be a pretty awesome clinician, but you put me with five or six other really strong people, and man, we're unstoppable, right? So create your team. Who do you need on your team? And then I'm almost guaranteeing you that if there's something you need on your team, there's somebody inside this great big place that is going to be able to help support you with that, right? So you can do it alone, but but we're going to thrive better as humans when we live it together, when we deal with it together. And if you're having struggle with your relationship, with intimacy, with the mood, with your body, with pain, with erectile dysfunction, I promise you, you're not alone. Like
Yeah.
we know that somewhere around 80% of our population, and really, I think if truth be known and we really were able to look at it, that number would even be higher. But we know that that statistic is there. That's why we're here, is because someone needs to stand in those places along the way as well. So
Yeah.
I think saying, when is the right time to get help? Soon and often and routinely is the right time to get help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, this is an important thing. That's why we're here. That's why, City
Yeah,
of Hope said, hey, we need this, sexual wellness team to help support the patients because this is a
yeah.
huge part of your quality of life, and getting you back to
And just
feeling
wholeness.
like yourself.
Yeah, just that wholeness of me again, right? Finding me
Yeah.
again. And that begins with me. And then once I can kind of find me again in the story, then hopefully that gives me the energy to reach out and find you again. Um, how do they find us, Alex?
Well, they can actually just request sexual wellness appointments and the team will put, an order in. We're on the website too, so you can look up our profiles. Cindy Ingram is also one of our lovely sexual wellness nurses. She was unable to make it this evening to join us, but she is also available. And what's amazing is Cindy and Tracy are available to all of our sites, Atlanta and Phoenix and Chicago. So they have their nursing compact licensure, so you don't have to worry about that. And the greatest thing too is you're not going to get a bill from us. We're included with your treatment because the hospital feels it is so important to have that service available. So to be able to say, hey, you know what, I need this as part of my well-being and getting through treatment and coming back to myself and being able to connect with my partner and my loved ones again. And this is a service that's here and waiting for you to take advantage of.